Hello, today I'm recording a gameplay showcase of the game Elemental, which recently entered open alpha. The game is still in alpha, so a lot of the assets, graphics, UI, etc. are still placeholders and subject to a lot of change. But the gameplay is mostly there, though of course there is a lot of room for balancing changes, etc. And by playing the game, you would be giving feedback for balancing and stuff like that. So let's do a quick overview of what the game is, and then we'll actually jump into playing. The game is a 1v1 card battler, which is generally played online against other opponents. There's even rating systems and stuff like that. But right now we are playing against the AI opponent, which also comes included with the game. And in that way we can play solo, test out different strategies, use it as a sort of tutorial. Yeah, let's see what the game is. So it's a deck builder, 1v1. The goal of the game is to reduce your opponent's HP down to 0 or to increase your own HP to 160. Generally, most games end up with one person's HP reaching 0, but the other win condition is not particularly rare either. We start with 100 HP, but just damage is easier to deal than to restore HP. There's also gold, and gold is used to purchase cards. This is a deck builder, which means that throughout the game we'll be improving our deck by buying better cards or removing weak ones. So that's also quite important. It's a resource, so it gets accumulated throughout turns and then we can spend it. We also have mana. Mana is used to play spells during our turn. Currently, we're in a sort of setup phase, so we're not in the middle of a turn and we have 0 mana. But in a given turn, we get 1 mana, and each spell costs 1 mana, so we would be able to play only 1 spell per turn, which is not too unusual for deck builders. But later on, we might be able to buy cards that give us extra mana, or have relics that give us passive extra mana per turn, or only in some conditions and stuff like that, which might be rather important later on, but at the start is not the most important thing. We can check out our starter deck, and we can also at any point check out the opponent's deck, which is the same at the start. It is full of a bunch of boring spell cards which just give you 1 gold, and 1 blessing, which is the same effect. The difference is blessings do not cost gold to play, so blessings, do not cost mana to play, so blessings are free, and usually they're like more expensive or weaker, or in this case they're rarer because there's only 1 of those. Yeah, other than that, it doesn't really matter whether a card is a spell or a blessing other than the mana. In all other ways, they're equivalent. And yeah, the cards here that we see, they're not ours or they're not our opponents. These are draft cards, so we will pick 3 out of these 6, and our opponent will also pick 3. We'll take turns alternating, and we will add them to our decks, and then we start the game. So this immediately seeds our decks with some cards that actually do stuff, and in most turns we will try to play one of these cards instead of the starter ones. We can also open up the shop here. So throughout the game, we will be able to refresh the shop and see 5 new cards from it. Currently at the start, there's no shop laid out. And here we see all of the current cards that exist in the game that are purchasable. And first we see some more powerful cards here. And there's, other more interesting cards. But there's also blessings. So there's spells, the purple ones. There's blessings. There's also relics. Relics are cards that are immediately deployed when we buy them, and they provide some kind of passive effects or conditional effects and stuff like that. And there's some that are like active ones that you have to choose to use them. So for example, this card lets us discard 3 cards from our hand to gain 1 mana. And there's a lot of other similar stuff like that. There's also miracles. Miracles are the orange cards. They provide effects as soon as they're bought, and then they disappear, so they don't go into our deck. And for example, this miracle is rather expensive. It says that when we buy it, we trash all cards from our hand, and trash means to permanently remove. So if we have like a hand of like kind of weak bad cards, and we buy this card, we would be able to really clean up our deck quite quickly. And lastly, there's curse cards, which are kind of bad cards, but go into your opponent's deck, and they're not playable. So this is kind of the reverse of trashing cards. Now that we know what kind of cards there are, before we make our choice for the draft, let's see what the unique mechanic of Elemental actually is. So there's these elements here that they're represented by 1 to 6 dice, and they all have different strengths, which are randomized at the start of each game. And no two games are gonna be the same because of the initial randomization of the elements and the set of draft cards that are available, and also just the first few turns already make the game go into a very unique direction. So the way this works is that each card that kind of progresses us to our win condition or gives us gold, like for example, this card just says gain, gold icon gold, and the gold icon is the gold element. So it's kind of funny. It says gain gold gold, but the first gold is the element gold. And this card will basically say gain 3 gold at the moment because the value of this element is 3. But if its value was 6, it would say gain 6 gold. So it would be 2 times as powerful. While if it was 1, it would basically be the same as a basic income and it would be barely worth playing. The same goes for, let's say, this card, which says deal earth damage, which is 6 right now. So that's rather good for early card. Or this restores us HP, and we can see in this particular game the values of the dice are generally quite high across the board. And we call this mechanic elemental scaling, which also gives the name of the game. Now, its counterpart, which is very important for the game, is dice control. So a bunch of cards are able to change the values of the dice. So let's say this card says reroll a die up to once. So let's say we use it on the earth die and its value is completely randomized now between 1 and 6. So maybe this card used to be strong because it was 6 and we were lucky, we roll a 1. And now this element is 1 and this card is like really weak. And in this way, even if our opponent has on paper, let's say, higher value cards, if we have a lot of dice control and are able to play this dice control, we might be able to reduce the value of their deck like 6-fold and basically completely nerf it. While we might have just more boring cards, weaker cards, but if we are able to keep their values high, we would, we would do quite well. Of course, we can't just invest in dice control because then we're not doing anything else and maybe our opponent outscales us in a different way. So it's a really fine balance of things. And there's different types of dice control cards. Here, 2 of the basic ones are just a single reroll or change the value of a die by up to 1. It doesn't loop around, otherwise it would be quite broken. But let's say we change the value of this water die, we would make it either a 4 or a 6, and depending on whether we have water cards or our opponent has water cards, we might prefer one or the other. And lastly, let's mention, so the way you gain gold, you have 1 gold per turn. There's also cards that literally say gain gold. But also whenever you deal damage or you restore HP, you also gain gold, which is equal to half the damage dealt or HP restored. So if we look at this, we deal 6 damage, but we would also gain 3 gold. So actually, in this particular case, this card is strictly better than this card. Water cards, they deal damage to both players, which sounds bad. Why would we do this? But the upside is that the damage is double. So now we gain double gold compared to, let's say, if we dealt only to our opponent. So this card would deal 5 damage to both of us and also give us 5 gold. And in that way, we gain more gold than with a regular attack. So really the right way to think of water cards is they are more econ cards instead of attack cards. Though in some cases, if our opponent has a lot less HP than us, we might also be using this to finish them off. The same goes for restoring HP, where we gain half of the value of the card as gold as well. So now our opponent has already chosen. They want to draft first. I guess they have a card they really like here. And they have chosen to draft second, which is, also an option. They prefer to draft second here. And we are able to bid for this second draft position. If we really think that drafting second is much better, we are able to bid 1 gold. It starts like a mini auction, and we'll actually do that. Okay, our opponent is happy with this, so we paid 1 gold. So instead of starting with 5, we'll start with 4, but we are able to draft second. Our opponent chose the water card. I guess they value econ heavily. Here I will take Gambling, and also the Tremor. So a lot of the dice are sixes, so I think it's quite important to have dice control. This may be rather tough for us. Our opponent left us with both dice control cards, which is good, but on the other hand, we don't really do much in our turn. They just play the basic income, and now it's our turn. Okay, let's use what we have. So our die is already a 6, so let's try to reduce some of theirs. Let's say try to reduce the value of the water die. Okay, so now our opponent plays a card, and for spells that scale with elements, it will say it in the tooltips also that the card is interruptible. Here, the last tooltip says it. Um, we can interrupt it by playing something before the card is executed. In this case, we don't have blessings in our hand that are applicable. I mean, we can play this, but there's no point to do this. But it might be really important later on if we have like something that, let's say, changes the value of this die that we're able to play in some way. But in this case, we will not interrupt. Okay, let's play our card. We deal some damage, we gain some gold, end our turn. Okay, maybe now let's try to use our gambling and hope we roll something low on one of, I guess, in the nature die. Quite unfortunate for us, but that's kind of the balancing of the randomized cards. Sometimes you're like really lucky, sometimes you're not lucky. We are able to refresh the shop, but I don't think we have quite enough gold yet to justify that, so let's hold off a bit. They continue with the water. They, as we can see, are quite a bit richer than us, but I think we have a lot of counterplay using the dice control. Okay, fairly standard turn from both of us. Sad that we weren't able to change this, and now our opponent refreshes the shop, and they also bought a card from it. Actually, 2 cards from it. If we're not sure what they bought, we can of course open their deck and see what they bought. So they bought a fire attack, a 2 times fire attack, which is quite strong at the moment, and also another card that gains them gold, which is also quite strong because the values of the dice are quite high. So I think what is best for us probably, let's try to gamble the fire die because they have 2x its scaling. Again, not terribly lucky, but at least it's not a 6. And we'll also buy this card, which gives us mana. So this card gives us 2 mana, and it's a blessing, so it costs nothing. Which I think should be quite good. Okay, they continue buying a lot of gold, gaining a lot of gold, and buying cards that give them gold. So I guess our opponent is trying to outscale us, and maybe our hope should be that eventually we're able to get something lucky with the dice control. I suppose let's try reducing this again. Okay, that's a lot better. So now we can breathe a bit. Okay. Here we have now 3 mana, so we're able to play out our entire hand. A bit unfortunate that we drew it with only basic incomes, but as the game progresses, I think this would prove to be quite useful. Okay, now let's we refresh the shop and see what is in here. We have something that is really important for us. There's even more dice control here. But I don't think we need any more at the moment. Maybe our opponent would like it. This relic is quite strong, but we don't have the gold for it, nor the prerequisite conditions, because when we buy it, we have to trash another relic. So actually, let's refresh the shop again and hope we see something that's actually good for us. Okay, we have 2, I think, reasonable choices, or maybe 3. Sabotage is also not bad, which would let us mess with our opponent's deck by seeing their top 4 cards from the draw pile and maybe discarding some of them. But I think we should go with either haphazard offense or trading vessels. I think it's quite early in the game, so trading vessels will definitely pay itself off. Each turn it gives us 1 extra gold, so we gain 2 gold per turn now. So I'll go with that. Okay, our opponent continues restoring their HP. Here we're not even able to make full use of the mana we have, but that's okay. And we actually also buy haphazard defense. And I'm not sure that we already mentioned this, so I will explain it now. The chance die here, the question mark, actually, unlike all of the other ones, is rerolled each time a card with its element is played before it is executed. So it's part of the execution. And yeah, this basically means that its value almost doesn't matter. We're just trying to, yeah, it's just like a random number generator. Okay, let's see what our opponent still has. Maybe they don't have any dice control, so let's decrease this die once again. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, now they bought some dice control, and also they bought a 3x Earth attack. So we have a Earth card, but they have a 3x Earth and Gold plus Earth, so I suppose it makes sense to try to reroll this die. Cool. I think our opponent is probably in a better position than us, but we still have counterplay, so okay, we were able to deal some decent damage here. That makes sense. Let's try to decrease this more. I think this is their strongest card at the moment. And we're also going to buy Forecast, which might be able to make us more, to let us make more informed choices. It lets us, first of all, it's a Blessing and Rosa card, so it's completely free, other than the initial cost to buy it. But it lets us see the shop's draw pile, and in that way, we might be able to make better choices. Band of Thieves is also not a bad idea, maybe, which lets us reduce the gold our opponent gains during their turn. But I think we want to keep some gold to have some pressure of buying something powerful. Okay, that makes sense. I suppose our opponent will buy some stuff. That checks out. So they bought another dice control and a mana card similar to ours, but it also deals self-damage. Okay, well, I think the next thing we should do is maybe reroll this die. Um, that checks out. Well, we try to reduce the fire die, but maybe we should buy this card and not reduce it anymore. Okay. Let's try to reduce the nature once again. That's better. So you can see the fire card is still in our draw pile and it's quite strong. So it is worth considering whether we want to increase its value. But I think I'll just reduce the gold values, the gold dice value. Okay, that's good. We managed to draw one of our cards on this turn, and I'm also happy I didn't increase the fire die last turn, because our opponent already played the card with it. Okay, let's hope we roll something high here. Well, not too fortunate, but happens. Let's buy this card, which is a curse. It goes into our opponent's deck, and also while they own it, they pay a really steep cost to trash any other card, so it will kind of really lock in our opponent with not purifying our deck. Their deck, sorry. Okay. Makes sense. Cool. Let's see what the next 5 cards in the shop are. So this is rather strong for us because it cannot be changed by dice control. So maybe we would like to save up for it, but maybe our opponent will buy it first. We'll see. And yeah, let's deal a bunch of damage now. From this shop, I suppose Trapper is interesting. So yeah, let's buy it. Trapper, it's a card that lets us set a card face down. So we still haven't shown this mechanic because it has not been relevant yet. But you're able to place cards face down. This costs 2 gold and 1 mana to do. And after that, they are retained until we actually use them. And using them is free. So this might be really useful if we face down like a powerful dice control card, and we interrupt our opponent when they want to play it. Or maybe we face down a really powerful shield and we use it when our opponent attacks us. Okay. I suppose let's continue with the dice control here. And I think what makes most sense probably is to reduce the value of the nature die again. Okay, get attacked. And our opponent actually bought the 3x chance, which makes sense. I don't think there's... I guess we can try to reroll the water and hope it's lower. Okay. I don't think we should reroll the shop at this point. Makes sense. And actually another use case of face down cards in some situations is we can just face down one of our bad cards. And, oh, I didn't mean to play that. I meant to play this, but that was my bad. But if we face down one of our bad cards, it just stays there. So at least we don't draw it again. Okay, let's hope our opponent... Well, that's rather lucky. Okay, let's do our attack now. And I think next turn we will refresh the shop. Okay, so let's first refresh the shop because we know we're gonna do it anyway. And after that, let's forecast to see whether in the next shop there's something particularly powerful. Doesn't the... Well, some of these cards are quite good, but not in our current situation, I think. Yeah, I guess not really. Cool. Okay, so let's just play our turn. I don't think there's anything we're interested in gambling right now, so we will place our dice control face down. And also we'll buy Luck in a Bottle, which basically just upgrades our gambling in a sense. Okay, our opponent increased the values of these two dice. And they also bought this quite interesting dice control card, which lets you flip over a die, so it can really change stuff. But I think our choice here is quite clear. We'll just play this. And I suppose we should buy Multitasking God. We do not have that much mana, and it would let us play even more stuff. Okay, so in this situation, I think it might be worth trying this. Maybe it will be reduced. There's some chance. Well, at least we didn't lose anything. And our opponent bought another dice control card. Okay, so let's play this. Hope we gain something high. Okay. And actually we'll face down this mana card because we don't really need it too much right now. And maybe later on we'll need it if we have, for example, in this hand, it is quite useful. Okay. Okay. The opponent keeps chipping away at us. They refresh the shop and that checks out. I think what we should do here is we can now increase this. And we have the face down mana card, so we actually are able to do this in the same turn. So we dealt a good chunk of damage here. And I suppose we should see what's in the next shop. So I think this would be really good for us, and it might be a clean way to end the game. So we'll buy Purism. And this basically is a card that if it's active in the same turn as like an attack or something that we have, will make it deal double damage, or you know, any other card. So yeah, this is really good in our spot because it targets cards that scale with a single element, and all of our good cards scale with a single element. Okay, so let's see what's next in the shop, though I don't imagine it will matter too much. This Gates of Singularity is actually quite powerful, so actually I think it's worth buying it. Okay, let's see what we get. let's do this because why not? Um, might be worth buying mana crystals to save up 1 mana here. And we can do that regardless. And we'll refresh the shop and also buy these Gates of Singularity. It says we ignore the multipliers in our opponent's cards until the end of their turn. And they have a lot of multipliers, so I think that's also good for us. Okay. This is actually why it's important we got this purism, because because the purism, it looked like we might be able to kill even without it, but our opponent has healing, so now it is quite necessary. I think what we should do here is face down the Trapper, because we might need it for a big turn like this one. And I think, well, our opponent dealt some damage to themselves, so actually they're back in lethal range even without the multiplication, but we had no way of knowing they would do that. I think they underestimated our one-turn kill potential. But, well, we don't actually need to double it, it's just borderline lethal, but let's show how this would work. So we play this card, and now when we play this card, it would actually deal 30 damage instead of 15. Yep, and we were able to close out the game rather cleanly. It looked like we were on the ropes for a while, but in the end, yeah, we managed to win.